You have experienced every moment of your life, every morning you've ever woken to, every meal, every conversation, every time you laughed so hard you couldn't breathe, and every time you cried when no one could see you. Every dream you've ever had, even the ones you forgot the instant you opened your eyes. All of it happened to you, from the inside. And yet, if you sat down with the brightest scientists alive and asked them a simple question, why is there an experience of being you at all? They could not answer it. Not really, not yet, maybe not ever. They could tell you about neurons, about electrical signals crossing tiny gaps between cells, about chemicals and circuits and regions of the brain that light up when you feel afraid or remember your childhood home. They could draw you a map of the machinery, but none of that explains the thing you know better than anything else in the universe, the fact that it feels like something to be you. There is no experience more familiar than this one. You have never, for a single waking second, burned without it. It was here before your earliest memory. It will, presumably, be here until the very end. And still, it may be the deepest mystery there is. I've thought about this more nights than I can count. Lying in the dark, not quite asleep, aware that I'm aware, and then aware that I'm aware of being aware, until the whole thing folds back on itself like a hallway of mirrors, and I have to almost shake myself out of it. Maybe you've done the same. Maybe you've had that moment where you suddenly notice that you are experiencing the room you're in, that you're not just in the world is somehow appearing inside you, a private screening with an audience of one. If you've ever felt that, even once, even faintly, then this is going to be a comfortable few hours, because that quiet, slightly vertiginous feeling is exactly where we're going to spend our time tonight. One thing clearly, before we begin, I'm not going to tell you that consciousness is quantum, or that your thoughts rearrange reality, or that physics has secretly proven what the mystics knew all along. There are people who'll tell you those things with great confidence, and confidence is exactly the wrong thing to bring to a mystery this large. What I can offer is gentler, a long, slow walk around the edges of the strangest questions human beings have ever asked, about awareness and dreams and who you are and whether the life you're living is the only one that was ever possible. I don't have the answers. I'm not sure anyone does, but I've come to believe the questions are worth sitting with, that there's something quietly healing in discovering you're not the only one who lies awake wondering. I'll tell you the thing that started all of this for me, because it's small, and I think the small things are where it always really begins. A while ago, I was clearing out a drawer. Nothing important, just an ordinary evening, the kind you forget by morning. And I found a photograph of myself as a child that I hadn't seen in years. And I sat down on the floor and looked at it for a long time. And the feeling that came over me wasn't nostalgia exactly. It was something stranger, a feeling I didn't have words for then and still struggle with now. It was the feeling that my life is somehow larger than the years I've actually lived, that there's more of me than one lifetime seems able to hold. The child in that photo, the person I thought I'd become, the dreams I've had that felt like whole other lives, the versions of me that almost happened and didn't. It was as if I was standing at the edge of something much bigger than a single span of days, and just for a moment, on the floor, in the lamplight, I could feel its size. I think a lot of people carry that feeling, the quiet sense that existence is somehow bigger than the life you're living inside of. You feel it looking at old photographs. You feel it in certain dreams. You feel it when you suddenly notice how much time has passed, or when you stand in a place from your childhood, or when you wonder, late at night, where you were before you were born. Why does existence feel larger than a single lifetime? I don't know the answer, but that question, quiet, almost wordless, easy to miss, is the thread I want to follow tonight. It runs underneath everything we're going to talk about, underneath consciousness and dreams and memory and the strangeness of physics. Every room we walk into is secretly another way of asking it. So here's where we'll begin. What if consciousness is stranger than we currently believe? Not stranger in a frightening way, stranger in a way that, once you see it, you can never quite unsee. A way that makes an ordinary Tuesday afternoon feel, for just a moment, like the most improbable thing that has ever happened. Let's start there, with the strangest fact of your entire existence, one so close to you that you've probably never stopped to notice it. The fact that you're conscious at all. I want you to try something with me, nothing dramatic. You don't even have to move, just notice the room you're in. Notice the quality of the light, wherever you are. Notice the small sounds underneath the sound of my voice, the hum of something electrical maybe, or wind, or the particular silence of late evening. Notice the feeling of wherever your body is resting right now, the weight of yourself against the chair or the bed or the floor. Now notice something else. Notice that all of that is appearing to someone. There's a strange double layer to every experience you've ever had. There's the thing itself, the light, the sound, the weight. And then there's the bare fact that it's being experienced. That somewhere, somehow, there is a point of view in the universe where all of this is showing up. That point of view is you. And here's the part that I find genuinely hard to get my mind around, even after years of thinking about it. There is nothing in our entire scientific picture of the world that requires that point of view to exist. Think about what science is really good at. It's extraordinarily good at describing behavior, how things move, how they interact, what causes what. If you want to know how a brain processes a flash of red light, neuroscience can take you a remarkably long way. It can trace the light hitting your retina, the signal traveling down the optic nerve, the cascade of activity rippling across your visual cortex. It can describe, in stunning detail, everything your brain does when you see the color red. But there's a question it sails right past, and that question is, why is any of that accompanied by an experience of redness? Why isn't all that processing just happening in the dark, silently, the way a calculator adds numbers without feeling anything about it? A calculator processes information, so does a thermostat. So, for that matter, does a falling rock in a loose sense. It responds to the slope it's on. None of those things, as far as we can tell, has any inner life. There's no one home, the lights are off. So why are your lights on? I remember the first time this question really landed on me. I wasn't reading a textbook. I was watching someone I love sleep. Slow breathing, eyes moving faintly behind their eyelids, somewhere far away in a dream I would never see. And I thought, there is an entire world happening in there right now. A whole universe of experience, completely private, completely real, and utterly invisible to me. I could scan that brain with the best instruments humanity has ever built, and I would see activity. Lights on a screen. I would never, ever see the dream itself. That gap between everything we can measure from the outside and the single thing we each know from the inside has a name. Philosophers call it the hard problem of consciousness. And I want to spend a little time with it, because I think most people feel this problem long before they ever hear it named. The philosopher David Chalmers gave it that name in the early 1990s, and he drew a line that I've found useful ever since. On one side, he put what he called the easy problems of consciousness. Now, these aren't easy in any ordinary sense. They're fiendishly difficult. Things like, how does the brain integrate information? How does it focus attention? How does it tell the difference between being awake and being asleep? How does it control behavior? But Chalmers called them easy for a specific reason. In principle, we know what an answer would look like. They're questions about function, about mechanism. Given enough time and enough cleverness, we can imagine solving them. They're the kind of problems science was built for. And then, on the other side, he put one question all by itself. Why is all that functioning accompanied by inner experience? Why does it feel like something? That's the hard problem. And the reason it's hard, maybe the reason it's uniquely hard, is that it doesn't seem to be a question about mechanism at all. You could, in theory, explain every mechanism in the brain, build a complete blueprint, account for every signal and every response. And the question would still be sitting there, untouched. You'd have explained everything the brain does, and the experience of being would still be a mystery. There's a famous thought experiment that gets at this, and I love it because it doesn't require any physics at all, just imagination. Picture a scientist named Mary. Mary is the world's greatest expert on the colour red. She knows everything, and I mean everything, about the physics of light, the wavelengths involved, the way the eye responds, every neuron that fires when a human being looks at something red. She knows the complete physical story. There is nothing left for her to learn about it. There's just one catch. Mary has lived her entire life in a black and white room. She's never actually seen red. She's only ever read about it in black ink on white pages. And then one day, the door opens, and Mary walks outside, and she sees a red rose for the very first time. Here's the question. Does Mary learn anything new in that moment? Most people, when they sit with it honestly, feel that the answer has to be yes. Of course she does. She learns what red looks like. She learns what it's like to actually have the experience. And if that's true, if there's something she didn't know despite knowing every physical fact, then experience seems to be something over and above the physical facts. Something the complete scientific description leaves out. I'm not telling you that thought experiment is airtight. Philosophers have argued about it for decades, and some of them have very sharp objections. I'm telling you about it because of the feeling it produces, that little jolt of recognition, the sense that yes, there really does seem to be a gap here, a gap between knowing about an experience and having one. You've lived your whole life on the far side of that gap, on the side where you don't just know about experiences, you have them, constantly, effortlessly. It's the most ordinary thing in the world to you, and it might be the single most extraordinary thing in the universe. The older I get, the more this strikes me. When I was younger, consciousness seemed obvious. Of course I'm aware. Of course there's a me in here. It wasn't even a question. It was just the wallpaper of being alive. But somewhere along the way, the wallpaper started to peel. I'd catch myself in odd moments, washing dishes, waiting at a red light, standing in a doorway, having forgotten why I'd come, and I'd suddenly feel the strangeness of it. I'm in here. There's a whole someone in here, watching all of this happen, and one day there won't be. And the dishes and the doorways will go on without any of it being witnessed by me. Maybe you felt that too, that sudden, almost dizzy awareness of your own awareness. It tends to come unannounced. You can't really summon it on purpose. It arrives, you notice it, and then ordinary life closes back over it like water. Let me try to make the mystery even sharper, because I don't want to undersell how genuinely weird this is. Everything else in your experience can be doubted. You could be wrong about the room you're in. Maybe you're dreaming it. You could be wrong about your own memories. Memory is famously unreliable. You could be wrong about almost anything. But you cannot be wrong about the fact that you're experiencing something right now, even if everything you're experiencing is an illusion. The experiencing itself is undeniably happening. That was the one thing Descartes felt he couldn't doubt. 400 years ago. I think therefore I am. Whatever else is uncertain, the bare fact of experience is the one thing standing on solid ground. So here's the strange situation we're in. The single most certain thing in your entire existence, the one fact you could never be deceived about, is the one fact our science cannot yet explain. I find a kind of comfort in that, honestly. We live in an age that's very good at making us feel like everything's been figured out, like the mystery has all been drained out of the world and replaced with diagrams. And then you turn your attention to the most basic fact of your own life, that you're here, experiencing this. And you realise the diagram has a hole in the very centre of it. A hole shaped exactly like you. And I've come to think some questions are like that on purpose. Some questions aren't meant to be answered once. They're meant to be lived with. Not solved and shelved, but carried, turned over slowly, for years. the way you'd carry a smooth stone in a pocket. That's not a failure of the question. That's what the deepest ones are for. Now, I want to be fair, because intellectual honesty matters to me, and I suspect it matters to you, or you wouldn't have made it this far. Not everyone thinks the hard problem is real. There are serious thinkers, and I mean genuinely serious, careful people, who believe the whole thing is a kind of illusion, a confusion built into the way we talk about ourselves. They argue that once we fully explain everything the brain does, the sense that there's also this extra mysterious experience will simply evaporate, that it only feels like a separate problem because of a quirk in how we're built to think about our own minds. I take that view seriously. I don't dismiss it. There may come a day when the mystery dissolves and we look back and wonder why we ever thought there was a puzzle at all. But I'll be honest with you about where I land, at least for now. When I sit quietly and actually attend to my own experience, the redness of red, the ache of a sad memory, the warmth of sunlight on my face, it does not feel like the kind of thing that's going to be fully explained by a wiring diagram. It feels like something else, something that, so far, has slipped through every net we've tried to catch it with. I could be wrong. That's allowed. We're not here to be right tonight. We're here to wonder well. There's a question that follows from all this, and once it occurs to you, it's hard to put down. If experience is so hard to get out of ordinary matter, if no arrangement of unconscious particles seems like it should add up to an inner life, then where does it come from? At what point in the long climb from atoms to molecules to cells to brains does the light switch on? We don't have a satisfying place to draw the line, and that's part of what makes this so strange. A rock, presumably, has no inner life. You, just as clearly, do. Somewhere in between, somewhere along the vast gradient from rock to bacterium to insect to dog to human, experience appears. But where? Does a fish feel? Almost certainly something. An insect? Harder to say. A single cell? Most people would say no. But why no? What exactly is the magic ingredient that one arrangement of matter has and another lacks? There's a very old idea. It keeps coming back, in different clothes across thousands of years, that tries to dissolve the problem by refusing to draw the line at all. The idea is that maybe experience doesn't switch on anywhere. Maybe it's there, in some unimaginably faint and simple form, all the way down. That the basic stuff of reality has, alongside its physical properties, some whisper of an inner aspect. And that what brains do is not create consciousness from scratch, but gather and organize it, the way a lens gathers scattered light into a single, bright point. I want to be careful, because this idea, philosophers call it panpsychism, is not established science. It's a philosophical position, a possibility held by a few serious thinkers and considered far-fetched by many others. I'm not telling you it's true. I'm telling you it exists because I think it's worth knowing that some of the people who've thought hardest about this have been driven, by the sheer difficulty of the problem, to wonder whether experience might be a fundamental feature of reality, rather than a late arriving accident. It tells you how deep the puzzle goes that thoughtful people reach for answers that radical. There's another line of thinking, more scientific in flavour, though still very much unproven, that tries to pin down consciousness not to a substance, but to a pattern. The proposal, roughly, is that experience arises wherever information is woven together in a sufficiently unified, irreducible way, where the whole genuinely becomes more than the sum of its parts, where you can't carve the system up without destroying something essential. By this view, what makes your brain conscious isn't what it's made of, but how exquisitely integrated it is. A pile of disconnected components has no inner life. Weave them together tightly enough, in the right way, and, the theory speculates, the lights come on. I find that one beautiful, and I hold it loosely, the way I hold all of these. It's a serious attempt, debated by serious people, and far from settled. But notice what even the attempts have in common. Every honest theory of consciousness ends up sounding a little astonished at its own subject. None of them can quite say, plainly, here is where the inside of the universe comes from, and here is why. They circle it. They gesture at it. They leave you in the end, still standing in front of the same quiet miracle, that there is anyone here at all to be told the theory. And here's what I keep coming back to, the thing that turns this from an abstract puzzle into something that touches everything else we're going to talk about. If experience really is this strange, if consciousness really is something our physics doesn't yet have a place for, then a whole set of other questions stop being silly and start being serious. Questions like, where does experience come from? Did it switch on at some point? Or has something like it always been woven into the fabric of things? What happens to it when we sleep, when we dream, when the ordinary rules of the waking world quietly dissolve? And what's the relationship between this inner world of yours and the outer world that physics describes? The world of particles and forces, and that famously bizarre layer of reality we call the quantum? Those questions are where we're headed, slowly, no rush. There's one more thing about consciousness I want to name before we move on, because it might be the loneliest fact there is, and almost no one ever says it. You can never share it. Not really. Not the thing itself. You can describe your experience. You can spend hours telling someone what it's like to be you, your joys, your fears, the particular flavour of your sadness, the way the world looks from inside your eyes, and they can listen with their whole heart, and they still will never actually have your experience. They'll have their own experience of your words, assembled inside their own private theatre, coloured by their own life. The actual texture of being you, the raw feel of it, stays sealed inside you, forever, uncommunicated, uncommunicable. Two people can love each other for 50 years, lie beside each other every night, finish each other's sentences, agree, and never once directly touch the inside of the other's mind. Every conscious being is, in this one specific sense, utterly alone. A sealed world, a light burning behind a window that no one else can ever climb through. I used to find that unbearably sad. I think I felt it most sharply as a teenager, that conviction that no one could really understand, that whatever was happening inside me was happening behind glass. And I assumed that feeling was a flaw in me, a failure to connect, something to grow out of. It took me a long time to realise it isn't a flaw at all. It's the basic condition of being a conscious creature. Everyone is behind the glass. The person who seems most understood, most surrounded, most known, they're behind it too. We are all of us sealed worlds, calling out to each other across a gap that words can only ever reach part way across. And here's the strange turn, the thing that softened it for me. Once you understand that everyone is in the same situation, that the loneliness isn't yours alone, but the shared inheritance of every conscious being who has ever lived, it stops being lonely in quite the same way. There's a companionship in it. We are all alone, together, each of us a sealed light, calling out across the dark, and the calling out, the reaching, the trying to be understood, even though we can never fully be. That might be the most human thing we do. It's what art is, it's what love is. It's what this conversation is right now. Two sealed worlds, reaching toward each other, across the gap, and getting closer than nothing. Closer, maybe, than we have any right to. And that, if I'm honest, is the thing I've slowly come to understand after years of making these, years of reading the messages people send me late at night, of the quiet things strangers tell me they've never told anyone. What I've learned is that most people aren't really looking for answers to these questions. They're looking for confirmation that other people are asking them too. That's it. That's the whole thing. Nobody writes to me because they think I've solved consciousness. They write because somewhere in the dark they felt the strangeness of being alive, and they assumed they were the only one. And then they heard it said out loud and felt the floor of that loneliness give way a little. We're not hunting for the answer, we're hunting for company inside the question. So if nothing else happens in the next few hours, if I don't convince you of a single theory, I'd be glad if you simply left feeling a little more accompanied, a little more certain that the strange things you've quietly wondered about are wondered about right now by more people than you could ever count. But before we go anywhere near physics, I want to spend time somewhere far more familiar, somewhere you've visited every night of your life, even if you don't remember the trip. Because there's one place where the strangeness of consciousness stops being abstract and becomes something you can actually feel. A place where reality bends, where the impossible feels ordinary, where you can be utterly convinced of a world that doesn't exist, and then wake up and have it vanish without a trace. I'm talking about dreams, and I think dreams have something to teach us about reality that we've been overlooking precisely because they're so close to us. Let's go there next. Have you ever had a dream so vivid that waking up felt stranger than the dream itself? Where you opened your eyes and, for a few disoriented seconds, you genuinely didn't know which world was the real one? Where the bedroom seemed like the illusion, and the place you'd just left, the one that's already dissolving, felt like the truth you were being torn away from? I've had those. Not often, but a handful of times in my life, and I remember every one of them, which is itself a little strange, because I forget almost all my ordinary dreams within minutes. These ones stayed. They left a mark, the way certain real memories do, and for years afterward I could return to them and feel something, a place, a face, a particular light, as if I were remembering an actual afternoon from an actual life. Except it never happened. There was no place. There was no afternoon. My brain built the entire thing out of nothing, in the dark, while I lay still, and then it convinced me, completely, without the slightest doubt, that I was somewhere real. When you stop and think about that, it's genuinely astonishing. Every single night you generate an entire world, fully rendered. Sights, sounds, people, emotions, a sense of space, a sense of time, and while you're in it, you almost never suspect a thing. That last part is the one I can't get past. While you're dreaming, the dream feels completely real. You accept the most absurd things without blinking. The dead are alive again, and you're not surprised. You're somewhere you've never been, but you know it intimately. The rules of physics quietly bend and you just go along with it. Your critical mind, the part that should be saying, "Wait, this makes no sense," is mostly switched off. And so you wander through impossibility as if it were Tuesday. I want to stay on one of those for a moment. The dead are alive again. Because if you've ever lost someone, you may know the particular dream I mean. The one where they're simply there again. Not as a ghost, not as a memory, just there, ordinary, alive, in the kitchen, on the phone, beside you, exactly as they were. And in the dream you're not even surprised. You don't think, but you're gone. You just talk to them. You're with them, and it's so plain and so easy that it feels less like a dream and more like a visit. And then you wake up. And there's a second, just a second, before the truth comes back. A soft, warm second where they're still alive, because your mind hasn't reloaded the fact yet. And then it does. It always does. And you have to lose them again. Quietly. Alone. In the first grey light, before you've even sat up. I don't know anything that captures the strangeness of consciousness more completely than that. That your own mind can reach into the dark and rebuild a person so perfectly. Their face, their voice, the exact way they said your name, that for a few minutes they live again, fully inside you. The people we've lost aren't entirely gone. Some part of them is still in there, detailed enough that your sleeping mind can call them up and let them walk and speak. We carry the ones we love as something more than memory. We carry them as someone our mind can still become acquainted with again, in the dark, without warning. And maybe that's the first small hint of the question I said we'd be following all night. Because in those dreams, your single lifetime briefly holds more than itself. It holds the dead. It holds a reunion that the waking world says is impossible. Existence for those few minutes is larger than the life you're actually living, wide enough to fit someone time already took away. And here's the uncomfortable thought that follows from that. If your mind can construct a world that convincing and persuade you so completely that you're awake inside it, how do you know it isn't doing something similar right now? I'm not trying to frighten you. I don't actually think you're dreaming this. I'm fairly sure the world is out there, much as it appears, but I want you to sit with the structure of the situation, because it's more unsettling than we usually admit. Everything you have ever experienced of the outside world, you have experienced from inside your own head. You have never touched reality directly. Not once. Every sight is a reconstruction your brain assembles from light. Every sound is a model your brain builds from vibrations in the air. The warmth of a hand, the taste of coffee, the colour of the sky, none of it reaches you raw. All of it is rendered internally by the same organ that renders your dreams. The waking world and the dream world are built by the same machinery. The difference is just that while you're awake, the rendering is being constantly corrected by information coming in from outside. The dream runs without that correction. It's the same projector. One show takes requests from reality, the other makes it up as it goes. I find that genuinely humbling. We walk around feeling like we're in direct contact with the world, like we're seeing what's there. And we're not quite. We're seeing our brain's best running guess about what's there. An extraordinarily good guess refined over millions of years, accurate enough to keep us alive. But a guess, a model, a controlled, corrected, continuously updated dream that we've agreed to call reality. And here's how partial that guess really is. Of everything happening around you right now, your mind is letting almost none of it through. There is far more light than your eyes can register, far more sound than your ears can catch. Whole ranges of reality your senses simply don't pick up at all. Other animals live in completely different worlds. They smell landscapes you can't imagine, see colours you'll never see, sense magnetic fields and electrical currents you have no organ for. The world you experience isn't the world. It's the narrow slice of it that your particular kind of creature was built to notice. And even within that slice, your attention is throwing most of it away. Right now, there are sensations all over your body you weren't aware of until I mentioned them. The feeling of your feet, the contact of clothing against your skin, the position of your tongue in your mouth. They were there the whole time. Your mind was filtering them out, deciding moment to moment what's worth bringing into the light of awareness and what to leave in the dark. You experience only the tiny fraction your attention selects. The rest happens to you unwitnessed, in your own body, all day long. So the world you live in is doubly narrowed. First, your senses catch only a sliver of what's out there. Then your attention spotlights only a sliver of that sliver. The reality you actually experience, the only one you'll ever have, is an exquisitely thin, hand-picked summary, edited in real time by a mind making constant choices about what you get to be aware of. You are not seeing the universe. You're seeing the highlights reel your brain decided you needed. And the strangest part, it doesn't feel partial at all. It feels complete. It feels like the whole world is simply here, in front of you, fully present. The editing is invisible. The frame around your experience is made of the same stuff as the experience, so you can't see its edges. You only ever notice the spotlight, never the vast dark stage around it. Before we go further into dreams, I want to linger at the doorway, the strange threshold you cross every single night, and almost never remember crossing. Think about the moment of falling asleep. Have you ever tried to actually catch it? To stay aware right up to the edge and notice the instant you cross over? It's nearly impossible. The moment you fall asleep is a moment you're structurally unable to witness, because witnessing it would mean you are still awake. You've fallen asleep thousands upon thousands of times, and you have never once seen it happen. The most regular event of your life, and it's completely hidden from you. You're always already gone by the time it's done. But just before that, in the minutes when you're sinking but not yet under, there's a strange borderland that has its own name. Hypnagogia, the threshold state. Maybe you know it without knowing the word. It's where your thoughts start to come loose from logic, where a perfectly ordinary train of thought suddenly takes an impossible turn and you don't notice, where you might see drifting colours, faces, fragments of scenes behind your closed eyes, small unbidden images rising up out of nowhere, where you sometimes hear your name spoken, or a snatch of music, or a voice saying something that makes no sense, clear as anything, in an empty room. It's the mind loosening its grip, the waking rules dissolving one by one, the dream machinery warming up, while a thin sliver of you is still awake to watch it begin. And then the sliver closes, and you're over the edge, into the full dream, and the watcher switches off. I find that borderland fascinating, because it's the closest most of us ever get to watching our own consciousness change states, watching the solid daytime self come apart at the seams. For a few minutes each night, you get to feel reality go soft, and then you lose consciousness of the very process you were observing. It's like standing at the shoreline, watching the tide come in, and then realizing you've been carried out to sea with no memory of the water rising. And every morning you make the same crossing in reverse, surfacing from somewhere deep, reassembling the self, the room, the day, the name, the whole apparatus of being you, usually in the first few seconds. So fast and so smoothly that you never notice you've just rebuilt an entire person and an entire world from scratch. We do this twice a day, every day, our whole lives, dissolving and reassembling, and we treat it as the most ordinary thing imaginable. Let me take you somewhere stranger still, because there's a kind of dream that breaks the rules of dreaming itself. Have you ever, in the middle of a dream, suddenly realized you were dreaming? It's called a lucid dream, and if you've had one, you'll know there's nothing quite like it. One moment you're swept along in the story, believing it all, and then something snaps into place. A small impossibility you finally notice, a flicker of suspicion, and suddenly you know. You're aware that none of this is real. You're awake inside the dream, and what's remarkable is that the dream doesn't necessarily end. You can stay. You can look around at a world you now know your own mind is generating, in real time, in impossible detail. People have described looking closely at their own hands in a lucid dream, at the texture of a wall, at writing on a page, and finding it all rendered with a richness that no waking imagination could ever produce on demand. You couldn't consciously imagine a scene that detailed if you tried for an hour, and yet some part of you builds it instantly, effortlessly, every night, and you usually don't even get to see the craftsmanship because you're too busy believing it. There's good scientific evidence that lucid dreaming is real, by the way. This isn't folklore. Researchers have worked with skilled lucid dreamers who agreed before falling asleep to make specific pre-arranged eye movements once they became lucid. And then, deep in the dream state, with the rest of the body paralyzed as it normally is during dreaming, those exact eye signals appeared, on cue, measurable on the instruments, a message sent from inside a dream to the waking world, a hand raised from the other side of the veil. I think about that experiment a lot. Someone, fast asleep, fully aware that they're dreaming, deliberately signaling out to us, I'm in here. I know where I am. It's one of the few times the inner world has reached across and tapped the outer world on the shoulder. And then there's the experience that for me is the strangest of them all. The one that genuinely shook me the first time it happened. The false awakening. Maybe you've had this. You wake up, you're sure you're awake, you get out of bed, you start your morning, and then something goes wrong. A detail that doesn't fit. The light is strange. The hallway is too long. And you realize, with a jolt, that you're still dreaming. You were never awake at all. The waking up was part of the dream. And sometimes this is the part that unsettles people. It happens again. You wake up a second time, relieved to be out of it. And that one's a dream too. Layers within layers. A dream of waking nested inside a dream of waking, and you genuinely cannot find the bottom. The first time it happened to me, I lay very still afterward, properly awake at last, heart going, and I had this thought I'd never had before. How do I actually know I'm awake now? And I couldn't find a fully satisfying answer. Everything felt real. But it had felt real a minute ago too, twice over. The feeling of reality, it turns out, is not a reliable guide to reality. Your mind can produce that feeling whenever it likes. It hands it out for free every night to scenes that don't exist. There's something else about dreams I've never fully understood, and maybe you've noticed it too. Time doesn't work right in them. You can live what feels like an entire afternoon, a whole journey, a sprawling story with a beginning and a middle and an end, and wake to find that only a few minutes have passed. Whole dream lives, unfolding in the time it takes a clock to tick a little way forward, as if your mind, freed from the steady drip of the outside world, can stretch and fold time however it likes, as if the hours you experience are not measured out by reality at all, but generated, like everything else in there, from the inside. And that makes me wonder about waking time too, because you've surely had the opposite experience, an afternoon that crawled, a year of your life that blurred past in what feels like a season. Time, even awake, is not the steady thing the clock pretends. It's something your mind is doing, a rate of experience, not a fixed external flow. The clock keeps its even beat on the wall, but the time you actually live in, that runs faster and slower, stretches and compresses, and is, like the dream, partly your own creation. Then there's that other strange flicker, the one with the French name, déjà vu, the sudden uncanny certainty that this exact moment has happened before, that you've stood in this room, said these words, felt this light, somewhere outside of time. It passes in a second, and we mostly laugh it off. But while it lasts, it's genuinely disorienting, a glitch in the seamless feeling of now, a moment where the present briefly feels like a memory, or a dream you're having for the second time. No one fully understands what déjà vu is, though there are theories about small hiccups in how the brain files an experience, tagging the present moment as remembered by mistake. But set the mechanism aside and just feel what it reveals, that your unshakable sense of this is happening now, for the first time, is itself something your brain produces and can occasionally get wrong. The feeling of freshness, of nowness, of reality unfolding live. That's a setting too, a rendering choice, usually reliable, not always. And here's the thought that ties the dream and the memory together into one quiet unease. Reach back for a memory, a real one, from years ago, a room you used to live in, a person you used to love. Hold it in your mind for a moment. How is that, in its felt texture, so different from a dream? It's a scene playing inside you, built by your mind, with no external original presence anywhere. The room is gone, the moment is gone, the people may be gone. All that exists now is the reconstruction. And memory, we know, is not a recording. It's a rebuilding, done fresh each time, edited a little with every recall, coloured by who you are today. The past you carry is, in a real sense, a kind of waking dream, a world your mind generates on demand, convincing, lived in, and gone the moment you stop attending to it. So you spend your nights in dreams your mind builds, and your days partly inside memories your mind rebuilds, and even the present moment reaches you only as your brain's live rendering of a world you never touch directly. The dreamlike quality isn't confined to sleep. It runs all the way through. We just don't usually let ourselves notice. Now, I want to be careful here, because this is exactly the kind of place where it would be easy to spin off into something grand and unfounded. I'm not going to tell you that reality is a dream, or that the universe is a simulation, or that none of this is real. I don't know those things, and neither does anyone who claims to. What I'll say is gentler, and I think truer. Dreams show us from the inside something we'd otherwise have to take on faith, that the entire felt texture of a world, its solidity, its presence, its utter convincingness, can be generated by a mind. We have direct, nightly, personal proof that consciousness can build a reality so complete that we live inside it without question. That doesn't mean waking life is a dream, but it does mean that the line between real and experienced is thinner and stranger than we usually let ourselves notice. Your reality, the only one you'll ever have access to, is something happening inside your experience. Always has been. There's no version of the world you can get to that isn't first passing through the strange private theatre of your own mind. And this loops us straight back to where we started, doesn't it? Because if the world only ever reaches you as experience, if even the solid, waking, ordinary world is something rendered inside consciousness, then consciousness isn't just one more object sitting in reality. It's the thing reality shows up in. The screen everything else is projected onto. The one thing that has to be there first, before anything else can appear at all. I sometimes wonder where dreams come from. Not the neuroscience of it, we'll touch on that, but the deeper thing. Every night, a part of me I never meet sits down and writes a story, casts the characters, builds the sets, and screens it for an audience of one, and then strikes the whole production before morning so thoroughly that I usually can't recall a frame. Who is that? It's me, obviously, and yet it's a me I have no conscious access to, a me that knows things I don't, that can generate faces I've never seen, conversations I never planned, fears I didn't know I carried. A whole hidden author living in the same skull as the one talking to you now. Maybe you felt that too, the sense that there's more of you in there than the part you usually call I, that the self you present to the world is just the visible tip of something much larger and stranger underneath. I'll be honest with you, dreams are the one subject I keep returning to, over and over, far more than I could ever fit into a single journey like this one. I've spent years with them. There's more there than one video could ever hold. We're only going to brush the surface tonight, but even the surface is enough to feel the shape of the question underneath everything. Because notice what dreams have just shown us. Every night, without your permission, your single life quietly expands. You live in places that don't exist. You speak with people who are gone. You become someone who does things the waking you never would. One lifetime, and yet it contains thousands of nights, each one a small unrecorded life of its own. You are already, every night, more than the one life you think you're living. That's the thread. Why does existence feel larger than a single lifetime? Maybe partly because, in the most literal way, it already is. You've been living extra lives in the dark since before you can remember. That's where I want to go next, inward. Not toward dreams this time, but toward the dreamer, toward the question of who, exactly, is having all this experience. Because we keep saying you are conscious, you have these dreams, you are experiencing this room. But the deeper you look at that you, the more it starts to come apart in your hands. And what you find underneath might be the most emotional part of this whole journey. I want to start this part by going back to that photograph, the one I told you about at the very beginning, the one I found in a drawer and sat with on the floor, because I never told you what was so strange about it, and it's the doorway into everything in this part. So let me ask you to do what I did. If you have one nearby, or one in your mind, find an old photograph of yourself, a real old one, from childhood if you can, and look at it for a while. There's a particular feeling that comes when you look at a photo of yourself as a small child. It's hard to name. On one hand, you know, intellectually, certainly, that the child in the picture is you. Same name, same life. An unbroken thread of days connects that small person to the one holding the photograph. And yet, on some other level, it doesn't feel like you at all, does it? You can't remember being them. You don't know what they were thinking. They had fears you've forgotten, and a sense of the world you've completely lost. If you passed that child on the street today, you wouldn't recognize them. They'd be a stranger who became you, a stranger who is you. I find old photographs almost unbearably strange the more I sit with them. There's a person in there who no longer exists in any physical sense. Every cell in that child's body has been replaced many times over. The face is gone, the voice is gone. The exact configuration of that little mind, the particular way they saw the world on the afternoon that photo was taken, is gone. Completely. Forever. You will never get it back. You can't even really remember it. And yet something carried through, something that lets you look at that photograph and say, with total conviction, that's me. What is that something? What exactly is the thread? It isn't your body. Your body has been almost entirely rebuilt, atom by atom, several times since then. The matter that made up the child in the photo is scattered across the world now, recycled into other things. Physically, you are not made of the same stuff at all. It isn't your memories, not really, because most of them are gone. You remember almost nothing of your early childhood. Vast stretches of your life have simply vanished from recall. If you are your memories, then you've already lost most of yourself, and you're losing more every day. It isn't your personality exactly, because that's changed too. The things that delighted you at 6 would bore you now. The things that terrified you then seem small. The opinions you held with absolute certainty 10 years ago, some of them you'd now argue against. The you of a decade ago and the you of today would not, on many subjects, agree. So what is it? What is the thing that stays the same underneath all the change? Here's the strangest part. When I look inward and try to find the thing that has remained constant my whole life, I keep arriving at the same answer. And it's not a thing at all. It's a vantage point. The one thing that has never changed is the bare fact of experiencing, the sense of looking out from behind my own eyes, that feeling of being a someone, a centre, a point from which the world is seen, that has been utterly continuous. The contents have changed completely. The body, the memories, the beliefs, the relationships, all of it has turned over, again and again. But the seat hasn't moved. There has always been a here from which it's all been witnessed. And it doesn't feel old. That's the thing that stops me cold. My body ages. My face in the mirror keeps quietly editing itself. But the awareness looking out, the one actually doing the seeing, feels exactly the same age it always has. It feels ageless, as if some part of me has been standing in the same spot my whole life, watching the years go by like weather. Maybe you know that feeling, the strange sense that you, the real you, the one behind everything, haven't gotten older at all, that you're somehow still the same awareness that lay in the grass as a child looking up at the clouds. The scenery has changed beyond recognition, but the one looking at it hasn't. People sometimes say this to me in quiet moments, almost embarrassed, like it's a foolish thing to admit. I don't feel any older inside. I feel like the same person I always was, just in a different body. And I always think, no, that's not foolish at all. I think you've noticed something true, something most people feel, and very few ever say out loud. Here's a small ordinary experience that carries the same strangeness, and almost everyone has had it. The first time you heard a recording of your own voice. Do you remember that? The faint shock of it. That's not what I sound like. It's a stranger's voice coming out of the speaker, using your words, and yet everyone around you nods, because to them, that is you. That's the voice they've always heard, the voice you hear from the inside, the one resonating through the bones of your own skull, is a private version only you will ever experience. The one the world hears, the one on the recording, is the real you that you can never quite hear directly. So even your own voice has two versions, the one you live inside and the one that's actually out there in the world. And they don't match. You've spent your whole life as a person who sounds to everyone else slightly different than you sound to yourself, and you only found out by accident, by hearing the recording. The mirror does something similar if you let it. Look at yourself in a mirror long enough, and a small estrangement creeps in. The mirror you is reversed. It's not the face anyone else sees. It's a flipped version only you ever look at. The face the world knows is the one in photographs. the one that often surprises us, the one we sometimes don't quite recognize. Do I really look like that? You've worn this face your entire life, and you still can't see it the way others do. You're the one person who can never simply look at you. And underneath the face, the strangeness goes deeper still. The body holding this face is not, in any literal sense, the body you were born with. Your cells are constantly dying and being replaced. Your skin, the lining of your gut, your blood, renewed on their own quiet schedules. The atoms that make you up are on loan from the world. They pass through you and move on, swapped out for others, so that over the years the physical material of you turns over almost entirely. The you of a decade ago and the you of today are made of largely different stuff. You are, quite literally, not the same matter you used to be. You're a pattern that the matter keeps flowing through, a standing wave in a river of atoms. The shape persists, the substance is always leaving. There's a beautiful, vertiginous idea hiding in all this, and philosophers have circled it for thousands of years without fully landing on it. The idea is that the self, the solid continuous I you take yourself to be, might be more like a process than a thing, more like a river than a rock. You know how a river has a name and a shape on the map, and you can point to it and say, that's the same river I swam in as a kid? And yet not one drop of the water is the same. The river is not the water. The river is the pattern the water keeps making, the shape that persists while the substance flows through and away. Maybe you're like that. Maybe the you that persists isn't a substance at all. It's a pattern, a shape, a continuity, something that stays recognizably itself while every actual ingredient is replaced. You're not a thing that endures. You're a process that keeps happening, moment after moment, each version handing off to the next, so smoothly that it feels like one unbroken self. Here's a question that sounds simple and turns slippery the moment you take it seriously. Where are you? Not your address, you, the self, the experiencer, the one looking out. Where exactly is it located? Most people, if you ask, point somewhere behind the eyes. There's a strong, almost universal sense that you live in your head, a little behind the face, looking out through the eyes like windows. But that's not quite right, is it? You don't feel your brain. The brain has no sensation of itself. The sense of being located behind your eyes is itself a kind of construction, a model your mind builds of where the centre of you is. People who lose limbs sometimes still feel them. People can be made with simple illusions in a lab to feel that a rubber hand is their own, or that they're floating slightly outside their body. The felt location of the self turns out to be surprisingly easy to move around. It's not a fixed fact, it's a setting like everything else. So where are you really? You're not in your hand, though your hand is yours. You're not exactly in your brain, though that's where the machinery is. You're not anywhere you can put a finger on, and yet you're undeniably somewhere. There's a clear sense of a here, a centre, a point of view. You are a location that has no location, a centre that, when you go looking for it, you can never quite find. Try it, even now. Turn your attention around and look for the one who's looking. Look for the self that's having this experience. What do you actually find? You find experiences, sounds, sensations, thoughts, this voice, but the one having them, the seer behind the seeing. When you turn to look directly at it, there's a strange way in which it's never quite there. It's always just behind you, doing the looking, never the thing looked at. Like trying to see your own eyes without a mirror. The very thing you're most certain of, that there's a you in here, slips away the instant you try to catch it directly. Contemplatives, in many traditions, have noticed this for thousands of years, and it tends to produce one of two reactions. Some people find it unsettling. If I can't even find myself, am I really here at all? Others find it strangely freeing, that the self you've been defending and worrying about your whole life is, when you look for it, more open and spacious and hard to pin down than you ever assumed. I won't tell you which reaction is correct. I've had both, on different nights. I only want you to notice the genuine strangeness, that the thing you are most sure of is the one thing you can never quite turn around and see. And if that's true, then here's a quiet, strange thought to hold. The child in the photograph isn't gone exactly, and they're not exactly still here either. They're the earlier shape of the same long process that's currently sitting wherever you're sitting, listening to this. You didn't replace them. You're what they turned into. The wave moved down the shore. Same wave, different water, different place on the beach. I think this is why aging can feel so disorienting. Not painful exactly, but uncanny. Because two things are true at once and they don't fit together comfortably. You are constantly changing, completely, relentlessly, and you are somehow always the same. I felt both of those at once hard a few years ago, and I've never quite shaken it. I went back to the street I grew up on. I hadn't planned to. I was passing through, and I had an hour, and my old house was a few minutes away. So I drove there and parked across from it and just sat in the car for a while. It was smaller than I remembered. They always are. Someone else's curtains in the windows now. A different colour front door. A tree in the front garden that hadn't been there. Grown tall in the years I'd been gone, which meant someone had planted it and watched it grow in the place where my whole childhood happened, without any idea that it was mine. And I sat there, and I could feel the boy who used to live there. I could feel him running out that door. I knew exactly how the gate sounded. I knew the particular crack in the path. For a second, the years just collapsed, and I was him, and no time had passed at all. And then a car went by, and I caught my own reflection in the rearview mirror. This older face, this person I've become, and the two of us were in the same place at the same moment. The boy who lived there, the man parked across the street, the same person, and not. Both completely real, separated by a lifetime, and by no distance at all. I think that's the strangest grief there is. Not grief for someone else. Grief and wonder in the same breath for the earlier versions of yourself, still so vivid, still somehow here, and yet as unreachable as anyone who's ever left. You can't visit them. You can only sit across the street from the places they used to be. And here's where it touches the thread we've been following all night. Because sitting in that car, I didn't feel like one person. I felt like many. The boy, the teenager, the young man, all the versions layered up inside me, like rings in a tree. Every one of them still in here somewhere, none of them entirely gone. One body, one name, and a whole crowd of selves I've been. That's part of why existence feels larger than a single lifetime, I think. Because you aren't a single self, living a single life. You're a long succession of selves, a whole population of people you've already been, all somehow still riding along inside the one who's here now. You've already been more people than you'll ever meet. I'll pause here for just a moment, because these particular questions, about the self, about what stays and what goes, turn out to be some of the questions consciousness researchers genuinely can't answer yet. And I get asked about them a lot. If this is the kind of thing that keeps you up at night the way it does me, I put together a small collection of the questions that have stayed with me over the years, the ones I keep coming back to, the ones I've never been able to fully put down. Not a guide, not really, more like a quiet list of the things I find myself wondering about in the dark, in case it's a comfort to see them written down by someone else. It's free. You'll find it linked in the description and in the pinned comment below, whenever you feel like it. And now, back to it. Because there's one more turn this takes, and it's the one that I think touches people the most deeply. I want to talk about a particular kind of memory. Not a memory of something that happened, a memory of something that was going to. When you were young, you had a sense of who you were going to become. You probably didn't say it in those words, but it was there, a quiet picture of the future you, the life you'd have, the person you were heading toward. Maybe it was vivid and specific. Maybe it was just a feeling, a direction, a sense of, I'm going to be the kind of person who, take a moment and try to remember that person, the one you thought you'd grow up to be. And now hold them next to the person you actually became. For almost everyone, those two people are not the same. The life you imagined and the life you're living have a gap between them. Sometimes a small one, sometimes an ocean. There were turns you didn't expect, doors that closed, doors that opened that you didn't even know were there. The person you became took a route the younger you never could have predicted, toward a place the younger you never pictured. I don't say this to make you sad. I want to be careful here, because it would be easy to make this section ache, and that's not what I'm after. What I find when I sit with this honestly isn't sadness exactly. It's something more like tenderness toward the younger me who was making such confident plans without any idea what was coming, and toward the current me who turned out so differently, and who is, let's be honest, also making plans right now that the future me will look back on with the very same tenderness. There's a whole chain of them, isn't there? Every version of you imagined a future. Every version was partly right and mostly surprised, and each one handed the baton to the next, who took it somewhere unexpected, who handed it on again. You are the current runner in a relay that's been going your whole life, and the person at the finish line, the one you're becoming, is right now just as much a stranger to you as the child in the photograph is. You're heading towards someone you haven't met. You're becoming them with every passing second, and you can't see their face yet. This is the thing I most wanted to say in this whole section, and I want to say it plainly, because I think a lot of people carry it silently and never hear it spoken. The grief you sometimes feel for the person you thought you'd be, for the lives you didn't get to live, for the doors that quietly closed, that grief is real, and it makes sense, and you're not sort strange or ungrateful for feeling it. It's the natural ache of a being that can imagine more lives than it can possibly live. You were built to picture futures, and you can only ever walk into one of them. And it isn't only your own passage you feel, it's the people around you. There's a moment, maybe you've had it, maybe it's still ahead of you, when you look at one of your parents and you suddenly see that they've gotten old, not gradually, all at once. You've seen them 1,000 times and somehow never noticed, because to you they were fixed, they were the constant, the one thing that doesn't change. And then one ordinary day you watch them reach for something, or get up slowly from a chair, or you notice their hands, and it lands on you like cold water. When did this happen? They were the giant who carried you, the one who knew everything, and the change was happening the entire time, in front of you, every single visit. And time hid it from you, the way it hides your own face aging in the mirror, a little each day, too slow to see, until it isn't. And in that moment, you feel the whole thing move, not as an idea, in your body. You feel the years that have actually passed, the real, enormous, irreversible quantity of them. And you understand, for just a second, that this has all been going somewhere the whole time, quietly, while you were busy living inside it. I think those moments are terrible and precious in equal measure. Terrible because they show us time's true speed, which we spend most of our lives carefully not looking at. Precious because they wake us up. For an hour after one of those moments, everything is vivid. You call someone you've been meaning to call. You look at the people you love as if you might not get infinite afternoons with them, which is true, and which we forget roughly every day of our lives. Hold on to that feeling, gently, for a little while, because we're about to go somewhere that takes it and opens it up into something vast. We've been talking about the lives you imagined and the life you got, the roads taken and not taken, the selves you might have been. I've been treating those unlived lives as something that exists only in your mind, as might-have-beens, as ghosts. But there's a serious idea in physics, strange, contested, and very much not proven, that suggests they might be more than that. To get there, though, we have to leave the inner world for a while and step into the most baffling region our species has ever discovered. A place where reality stops behaving like anything you've ever known. A place that has made the most brilliant physicists who ever lived admit openly that they do not understand what they are looking at. We have to talk about the quantum. Before I say a single word about physics, I want to tell you about a feeling, because that's where we always start. And I don't want to break the habit just because the subject is getting technical. Have you ever caught a glimpse of yourself in a window at night, a shop window, a train window, and for a half second not recognized who you were looking at? Or said a perfectly ordinary word over and over until it dissolved into pure nonsense sound? Or stared at your own hand until it stopped looking like your hand and started looking like a strange animal you'd been issued at birth? There are these little moments where the ordinary, solid, taken-for-granted world briefly loses its footing, where the floor of reality flickers just for an instant, and you see that the solidity you rely on is something your mind is providing, not something the world is guaranteeing. I bring this up because the quantum world is that feeling, made permanent. It's what you find when you go all the way down, past the objects, past the molecules, past the atoms, to the very bottom layer of physical reality. And when you get there, the solid world doesn't get more solid. It gets stranger. It stops behaving like a world at all and starts behaving like something closer to a dream. Let me tell you what they found. I'll go slowly, and I promise not to drown you in equations because the equations aren't the strange part. The strange part is plain enough to say, in ordinary words. That's exactly what makes it so disturbing. I'll tell you the truth about the first time I really understood the experiment I'm about to describe. I didn't sleep properly that night. I'd read about it before, the way you read about a lot of things. The words go in, you nod, you move on. But this one time, late, I actually let it land. I sat with what it was really saying about the world, and something cold went down my spine, and then I lay in the dark for hours with the ceiling above me, feeling different than it had that morning. Because if what this experiment shows is true, and it is, it's one of the most confirmed facts in all of science, then the solid, reliable, common sense world I'd been living in my whole life was, at its very foundation, doing something I could not make my mind accept. I'm telling you that, so you know what you're walking into. Not a fact to file away, a small quiet earthquake if you let it land the way I did. So let it land. For most of history, we pictured the smallest pieces of matter as tiny solid specks, little marbles. You have a marble, it's somewhere, it has a definite position, it's moving in a definite way, and if you don't look at it, it just keeps being a marble, doing marble things. That's common sense. That's how the whole visible world works. Then about a century ago, physicists started looking very closely at the smallest things, particles of light, electrons, the basic constituents of everything, and common sense quietly fell apart. Here is the experiment that broke it. It's called the double-slit experiment, and it is, by a wide margin, the strangest reliable fact I know. Imagine a wall with two narrow vertical slits cut into it. Behind it, a screen that records wherever a particle lands, and in front of it, a device that fires particles at the wall, one at a time, single particles, released one by one, with long gaps between them, so there's no question of them bumping into each other. Now, common sense says each particle goes through one slit or the other, left or right, and over time, you'd expect two bands to build up on the screen, one behind each slit, two stripes. That's what marbles would do. That is not what happens. What builds up on the screen, particle by patient particle, is a pattern of many stripes, a striped interference pattern, the unmistakable signature of waves, the kind of pattern you get when ripples overlap, reinforcing in some places and cancelling in others. But these particles were fired one at a time, a single particle alone, with nothing to interfere with. And yet the pattern that emerges is the pattern of something that went through both slits at once and interfered with itself. Read that again, slowly. Each individual particle, travelling alone, behaves as though it passed through both openings simultaneously, as a spread-out wave of possibility, and overlapped with itself on the way to the screen. Now here's where it tips from strange into genuinely vertiginous. Naturally, physicists wanted to catch the particle in the act, so they placed a detector at the slits just to watch which slit each particle actually goes through. A simple, reasonable thing to do. Look and see, and the moment they look, the moment which slit information becomes available, the particle stops behaving like a wave. The many-striped pattern vanishes. You get the two plain bands, two stripes, marbles again. The particle observed picks a single slit and goes through it like a sensible object. Stop watching, and the wave pattern returns. The particle goes back to passing through both. I remember the first time I really understood what that experiment was saying, and I had to put the book down and just sit there. Because the universe, at its most basic level, seems to behave one way when it's being observed and another way when it isn't. The act of finding out changes what happened. Reality, down at the bottom, appears to hold itself in a kind of haze of possibility, being in some sense all its options at once, until something forces it to commit to one. And I want you to feel what that does to a person, sitting alone with it at night, because the strangeness isn't in the equations. It's in what it means for the floor under your feet. You spend your whole life trusting that things are simply there, solid, definite, getting on with being themselves whether you look or not. The chair behind you, the wall in the next room. And this is telling you that down at the bottom, that trust might not be earned. That the world's definiteness, the very thing you lean all your weight on, might be something that only fully arrives when reality is pressed for an answer. I lay there and felt the ordinary room around me go faintly unreliable, the way a familiar word does when you say it too many times. It didn't frighten me exactly. It humbled me. The solid world had a soft spot at its centre, and I'd been walking on it my whole life without knowing. Now I have to slow way down and be extremely careful, because this is precisely the point where 100 years of confusion and 1,000 pieces of nonsense have entered the world. So let me draw some lines clearly. This part matters to me. What I just described, the wave-like behaviour, the interference, the change when measured, all of that is rock solid, established, repeatedly confirmed physics. It is not speculation. It is one of the most thoroughly tested findings in all of science. The whole modern world, every computer chip and every laser depends on getting this right. So whatever the quantum world is, it really does behave like this. That part is not in doubt. What is deeply in doubt, what physicists have argued about bitterly for 100 years and have not resolved, is what it means. What is actually going on? Why measurement changes things? What observation even is? And right there, in that gap between the solid facts and their uncertain meaning, is where this gets connected to consciousness. Sometimes responsibly, often not. I want to walk you through it carefully, so you can tell the difference for yourself. The word that causes all the trouble is observer. When physicists say the particle behaves differently when it's observed or measured, it is terribly easy to hear that as when a conscious mind looks at it. And from there, it's a very short, very tempting leap to consciousness affects reality. The mind shapes the quantum world. Your awareness collapses the possibilities. You've probably heard versions of this. It's everywhere. It sells a lot of books. So let me be as honest with you as I know how to be. In mainstream physics, observation and measurement almost certainly do not require a conscious mind. A measurement, in the technical sense, is just an interaction, any interaction, between the quantum system and a larger environment that records information about it. A detector does it. A stray air molecule does it. A photon bouncing off the particle does it. The system gets entangled with its surroundings. The delicate wave-like behaviour leaks away into the environment. Physicists call this decoherence. And you're left with the ordinary, definite world. No mind required. The detector in the double-slit experiment would do exactly the same thing whether a human ever looked at its readout or not. So when you hear someone say, physics proves your consciousness creates reality, the honest answer is that it almost certainly does not say that. and most physicists would tell you the same. The observer is a measuring device. The drama is in the interaction, not in anyone's awareness. I want to dwell on that for a second, because I think the careful version is actually more beautiful than the hyped up one, not less. The real mystery isn't, does my mind control particles? The real mystery is, why does the smooth, spread out world of quantum possibility, where things can be in many states at once, give rise to the sharp, definite, single world we actually experience? Why is your experience always of one outcome, one definite reality, when the underlying physics describes a shimmer of many? That transition from the many to the one is genuinely not fully understood. And whatever the answer is, it's likely to be stranger and more interesting than any slogan on a book cover. And I want to slow down on that, because I think it's where the physics quietly reaches over and touches everything we felt in the first half of tonight. One outcome, one definite reality, that's all you ever get. Down at the bottom, the world holds its options open, many at once, and yet your experience, every single moment of it, has been of one settled world. One now, one path, one life. You have never once experienced the shimmer. You only ever get the single thread that got chosen. Doesn't that sound familiar? It's the same shape as the ache we sat with earlier. The many lives you could have lived collapsed into the one you did. The physics at the foundation of reality is whispering the same thing your own heart already knew. That possibility is vast, and experience is singular. That somewhere beneath everything, the many becomes the one. And you are living, right now, inside the one. I don't know if those two things are really connected. Probably the universe doesn't owe us that kind of poetry. But I'd be lying if I said the rhyme didn't keep me up some nights. Now, having been that careful, I do want to be fair to the other side, because there is a real and serious minority view here, and intellectual honesty cuts both ways. There have been genuinely brilliant people who took the role of the observer seriously and wondered whether consciousness might, after all, play some deeper role in physics. Some of the founders of quantum theory mused about it. A handful of respected physicists over the decades have proposed that the mind might be where the many possibilities finally become one actuality. These are not crackpots. These are serious thinkers grappling honestly with a genuinely unresolved problem. But see, and this is the crucial point, these remain minority interpretations. They are not established. They are not the consensus. They are philosophical possibilities that a small number of careful people find worth exploring, not facts that physics has demonstrated. When I tell you about them, I'm telling you about open questions and live debates, not discoveries. Please hold them that way. I do. You may have heard of a cat. It's the most famous animal in the history of physics, and it was never a real cat. It was a thought experiment, dreamed up by one of the founders of quantum theory, Erwin Schrödinger. And here's the thing most people don't realize. He invented it to show how absurd the situation was, not to endorse it. The setup is grim, so let me keep it light and abstract. Imagine a cat in a sealed box, and inside the box, some device rigged to a single quantum event. An event that, by the rules we've been describing, exists in a haze of both outcomes at once until it's measured. If the event goes one way, the cat is fine. If it goes the other, it isn't. And so, the logic runs as long as that quantum event is in its haze of both at once, the cat too must be in some strange smeared together state of both outcomes, neither settled until someone opens the box and looks. Schrödinger's point was, that's ridiculous. Cats are not smeared together. A cat is one definite thing. So something must happen somewhere between the tiny quantum event and the large everyday cat that turns the haze of possibilities into a single fact. Where that happens and how, that's the measurement problem again. The same unsolved puzzle, now wearing fur. The cat is just a way of dragging the strangeness up out of the invisible world of particles and into a world we can picture, so we can feel how unresolved it really is. And then there's the phenomenon that troubled Einstein himself so deeply that he called it, famously, spooky. Entanglement. Here's the bare fact, and it's been confirmed in laboratories many times over. So this is solid ground, not speculation. You can prepare two particles together in such a way that their fates are linked, entangled. Then you can separate them. Carry one to the far side of a city, the far side of a continent, in principle, the far side of the galaxy. And when you measure one of them and it settles into a definite state, its distant partner is, in that same instant, correlated with it, as though the two were still somehow one system, no matter how far apart you've carried them. Einstein hated this. It looked on its face like something passing between them faster than anything should be able to travel. He was sure it meant the theory was incomplete, and yet experiment after experiment has confirmed that the correlation is real. The particles really are linked in a way that doesn't care about the distance between them. Now, I have to add the careful footnote, because this is another phrase the hype machine loves. Entanglement does not let you send messages faster than light. You can't use it to communicate, to control anything at a distance, to make one place affect another at will. The honest physics is subtler and stranger than that. The universe somehow maintains these deep correlations across any distance without using them to send any usable signal. What it tells us is not that we can transmit thoughts across space, but something quieter and more profound. That reality, at its root, is connected in ways that our everyday picture of separate, isolated objects completely fails to capture. The world is more woven together than it looks. The separateness we take for granted may be, at the deepest level, not the whole truth. I sit with that one a lot. Not because it means anything mystical, I'm careful not to claim that, but because it's a confirmed fact about reality that simply doesn't fit the world our senses show us. And it's a useful reminder, before we go further, of how provisional our everyday picture really is. There's something that quietly moves me about it too, and I'll admit it, even while holding the caution. We go through our days feeling like separate things, sealed off, each in our own skin, divided from everything else by clear, hard edges. And here is reality, at its very foundation, refusing that picture. Telling us the separateness is not the deepest layer. That two things, once joined, stay joined in some way that distance cannot touch. I don't make it mean more than the physics allows, but on certain nights it lands less like a fact and more like a kind of reassurance that the universe is woven, not scattered. That underneath the loneliness we talked about earlier, there may be a connectedness our senses were simply never built to feel. There's one more idea I want to introduce here, because it's probably the most famous attempt to genuinely link the quantum world to the conscious mind, and it deserves a fair and honest hearing, both for what it claims and for the serious objections against it. It's an idea developed by a well-known physicist and a well-known anesthesiologist, Roger Penrose and Stuart Hameroff. Penrose, who is one of the most respected mathematical physicists alive, became convinced, for reasons of his own, that human consciousness can't be explained as ordinary computation, that there's something the mind does, a kind of understanding, a grasp of truth, that no mere calculating machine could ever do. And he reasoned that if the mind isn't a computer, then maybe the source of its special quality lies in physics we don't yet understand. Maybe in the quantum realm. Hameroff brought a piece that seemed to fit. Inside your neurons, inside every cell actually, there are tiny structural elements called microtubules, very small. Small enough, the theory proposes, that quantum effects might be able to play out inside them. And the suggestion is that consciousness might somehow arise from quantum processes occurring in these tiny structures, all across your brain, in some orchestrated way. It's a bold, imaginative, genuinely fascinating idea. It tries to bridge the two deepest mysteries we have, the mind and the quantum, in one stroke. And now I have to tell you the other half, because I'd be doing you a disservice if I didn't. Most physicists and most neuroscientists do not accept this theory, and they have a serious, specific objection, not just a shrug. The objection is about warmth and wetness and chaos. Quantum effects of the delicate kind this theory needs are extraordinarily fragile. In the lab, to maintain them, physicists go to staggering lengths. Near-perfect isolation, temperatures close to absolute zero, vacuum, total stillness. The quantum haze collapses, decoheres at the faintest disturbance. And your brain is just about the worst imaginable place to keep something delicate. It's warm, it's wet, it's a churning, noisy, chaotic chemical storm at body temperature. The mainstream calculation suggests that any delicate quantum state in there would collapse almost instantly, vastly, vastly faster than the timescales on which your thoughts and perceptions actually unfold. By that reasoning, the brain simply destroys quantum coherence far too quickly for it to matter for the mind. So the dominant verdict for a long time has been, it's a beautiful idea, but the brain is too warm and too messy for it to work. I'll add the honest footnote, because the story isn't quite closed. In recent years, biologists have discovered, to nearly everyone's surprise, that some living systems do seem to use subtle quantum effects in warm, wet conditions, in how certain plants harvest sunlight, in how some birds may sense the Earth's magnetic field for navigation. This new field, sometimes called quantum biology, has made people a little less certain that warmth and wetness rule everything out. A little less certain. It has not shown that the brain uses quantum effects for consciousness. There is, as of now, no direct evidence that it does. But the door that many thought was firmly shut turned out to be, at most, slightly ajar, and honest scientists are watching it. So where does that leave us in this part of our journey? Let me gather it honestly, because I don't want you to walk away with the wrong impression in either direction. The quantum world is, beyond any doubt, profoundly strange, far stranger than the solid world of our everyday experience. That much is established science, not speculation, but the popular idea that this strangeness proves the mind creates reality, or that your thoughts steer the universe, or that physics has confirmed some spiritual truth, that is not established. And most experts would say it's a misreading of what the science actually shows. And the serious, careful attempts to link consciousness and the quantum at a deeper level, they exist, they're worth knowing about. Some genuinely brilliant people take them seriously, and they remain unproven, minority positions facing heavy and reasonable criticism. I find I can hold all of that at once without distress. In fact, I find it strangely satisfying, because what it tells me is that two of the deepest mysteries we have, what consciousness is and what reality is at its foundation, are both still genuinely open, still unsolved, still capable of surprising us. The book is not closed on either one. And every so often, a new finding nudges the door a little further open and reminds us how much we still don't know. That's not a frustrating place to be. To me, that's the most exciting place there is to stand. But I'll confess the quantum world left a seed in my mind that I can't quite shake, and it has nothing to do with whether the brain is quantum. It's that other idea, the one buried in the double-slit experiment. The idea that reality, at its base, holds many possibilities at once before settling into one. Because if you take that idea seriously, and some very serious physicists take it extraordinarily seriously, it leads somewhere that connects right back to that ache we sat with earlier. The ache of the lives you didn't get to live, the roads not taken, the selves you might have been. What if those other possibilities don't simply vanish when reality chooses? What if, in some sense almost too large to think about, they all happen? That's where we're going next. And I'll be honest, it's my favourite room in this entire house. It's the one I've spent the most time in, away from the camera, in the quieter and longer reflections I make, when a single video isn't enough to hold a question. There's far more of this than we'll get to tonight, but let me at least open the door. I want to begin this part with a question that almost everyone has asked themselves, usually in a quiet moment, usually alone. What if you'd made a different choice? There's always one. For most of us, there's more than one. A particular fork in the road where, if you'd turned the other way, everything after would have been different. A job you didn't take, a city you didn't move to, a person you let walk away, or a person you didn't. A small ordinary decision that turned out not to be small or ordinary at all, that quietly set the course of years. You can probably feel one of yours right now, a specific moment. A door you stood in front of and chose, and the choosing made one life real and left another one, the one behind the other door, forever unlived. I think about mine more than I'd like to admit. There's a particular one, a choice I made in my early 20s, quickly, almost carelessly, the way you make the choices that turn out to matter most. I said no to something, a door I could have walked through, and I've never stopped wondering about the version of me who said yes. Not always with regret, that's not quite the feeling. More with a kind of wonder. There's a whole life on the other side of that one small word. A complete, detailed, fully lived life, with its own joys and its own sorrows, its own ordinary Tuesdays, lived by someone with my face, who I will never meet. And it's as real to me as a held breath. I can almost see it. I'll never live it. We all carry these. A crowd of unlived lives walking quietly alongside the one we actually have, ghosts of ourselves, the people we might have been. For most of human history, that's all they were, might-have-beens, pure imagination, roads that don't exist except as a kind of wistful fiction we tell ourselves in the dark. But I told you, at the end of the last part, that physics has something strange to say about this. And it does. So let me tell you about one of the most extraordinary ideas in all of science. And as always, let me be scrupulously honest about exactly what kind of idea it is. It comes back to that quantum haze. Remember the picture. Down at the bottom of reality, things don't have single, definite states. They exist in a spread of possibilities, many at once, until a measurement forces a single outcome. The particle goes through both slits, until it doesn't. The deep puzzle, you'll recall, was, where do the other possibilities go? When reality chooses one outcome, what happens to all the others that were, a moment before, equally real parts of the description? The standard story says they simply vanish, collapse away, leaving the one. But nobody has ever fully explained how that collapse happens, or why, or what physically causes the many to become one. It's been called the measurement problem, and it has haunted physics for a century. In the late 1950s, a young physicist named Hugh Everett looked at this puzzle and proposed something audacious, a solution so bold that it was largely ignored, even mocked for years, before slowly becoming one of the most seriously discussed ideas in modern physics. Everett's proposal was this: what if the other possibilities don't vanish at all? What if there is no collapse? What if, every time reality faces a quantum choice, all the outcomes happen, but they happen in separate, branching versions of reality, each one just as real as the others, each one unable to see or touch the rest? This is the idea that came to be called the many worlds interpretation, and the picture it paints is staggering. In this view, reality is constantly branching. Every time a quantum event could go more than one way, and that is happening in countless tiny ways, everywhere, all the time. The universe doesn't pick. It splits. One branch where it went this way, another branch where it went that way. Both real, both containing observers who experience their branch as the single, definite, obvious reality, neither aware of the other, and the branches don't stop. They branch again and again, endlessly, each one spawning more, a tree of realities growing without limit. Every possible outcome of every quantum event actually occurring, somewhere in some branch of an unimaginably vast structure. Now, I have to stop and be very clear, the same way I was about consciousness and the quantum, because the same hype machine operates here. Many worlds is a serious scientific idea. It is taken seriously by serious physicists. Some very prominent ones consider it the most natural reading of the mathematics, precisely because it requires removing something mysterious rather than adding it. There's no special collapse to explain. The equations just run, and the branching falls out of them. But, and this matters enormously, it is an interpretation. It is one of several competing ways of making sense of the same equations, and the others are also held by brilliant people. We do not have, and may never have, a way to test which interpretation is correct, because by their nature, the other branches can't be observed from inside ours. It is not established fact. It is a profound and live possibility, debated at the highest levels, unresolved. Please don't walk away saying, science has proven there are parallel universes. It hasn't. It has proposed it seriously, as one way the strangeness might make sense. I hold it the way I hold all the best ideas in this story, as a genuine maybe, a door that may be open, not a room I've stood inside. But oh, what a maybe. Because here is where it touches that ache we've been carrying since part 3. Sit with me on this for a moment, gently, because it's a strange and tender place to stand. If something like many worlds is true, and I stress if, then those unlived lives we talked about might not be only imagination after all. The road you didn't take, the choice you didn't make, the person you let walk away. If reality really does branch at every fork, then somewhere, in some branch, there is a version of you who did, who took the other job, who stayed in the other city, who said the thing you didn't say. A complete you, living a complete life, on the other side of a wall you can never cross and never see. The lives you grieve might, in some unreachable sense, be being lived. I want to be careful, because I can feel how this could tip into something either comforting or unbearable, depending on how you hold it. You might find it comforting, the thought that nothing was truly lost, that every version of your life that could have happened did somewhere, that the full bloom of your possibility is realized across reality, even if you only get to walk one path of it. There's a strange peace in that for some people, a sense that the door you didn't open isn't a door into nothing. It's a door into a life that someone who is also you, actually got to live. Or you might find it unbearable, the thought of all those other yous, some of them happier, some living the life you wanted, just on the other side of a wall. That can sting. But here's where I've landed, and I offer it gently, just as one possibility among many. Whether or not those other branches are real, and we genuinely do not know, there is something the idea does for me regardless. It makes the life I'm actually living feel chosen in a way it didn't before. Because if every possible version of me is out there somewhere, then this one, the one writing these words, the one you're listening to right now, is the only one I get to actually be. The only one I experience from the inside. The only one whose Tuesdays I actually get to have. And that doesn't make this life smaller. It makes it the rarest thing there is. Of all the lives you might have lived, this is the one with you in it. The one where your awareness actually woke up and looked out. The others, real or not, are lived by strangers who happen to share your name. This one is yours. This is the branch where you're home. I want to stay with the smaller, more human version of this for a moment, because the cosmic scale can become so vast that it stops touching us, and I don't want to lose the thread that matters. Think about how much of your life turned on pure chance. Not your big, deliberate choices, the accidents, the friend you met only because you happened to sit in a particular seat, the person who became everything to you, who you'd never have met if a train had been on time, or a party hadn't been called off, or you'd left 5 minutes earlier, the work that came from a conversation you almost didn't have. So much of what matters most to us arrived through doors we didn't even know we were walking past, opened by coincidences so slight that they're vertiginous to look at directly. You can run it the other way too. The people you almost met and never did. The ones who passed within a few feet of you, on a street, in a station, in a crowd, who might have become everything, and who you'll never know existed. Your life is shaped not only by the chances that landed, but by the countless near misses you'll never even be aware of. a whole invisible history of almost walking quietly alongside the life you actually got. And then there's regret, which is really just this same feeling pointed backward at our own choices, the thing we said, the thing we didn't say, the chance we let pass. Regret is, in a way, the ache of being a creature who can vividly imagine the branch where they chose differently and who has to go on living in the one where they didn't. I've come to hold regret a little more gently than I used to, and this whole picture is part of why. Here's the thought. When you chose with the eyes you had then. You didn't have today's eyes. You couldn't see what you can see now. The version of you standing at that old fork was doing their honest best with what they could see from where they stood. And there's a quiet unfairness in punishing that earlier self, who was working half blind, with hindsight they never had. They made the only choice they could have made, being who they were, knowing only what they knew. The road not taken wasn't really available to that person. It only looks available now, lit up by a knowledge they didn't yet possess. So when the old regrets come, and they do, they come to everyone, usually in exactly these quiet hours. Maybe you can meet that earlier self with something closer to tenderness than blame. They were finding their way in the dark, just as you are right now, just as you always will be. And whatever else they got wrong, they got you here, to this moment, to this branch, the one with you in it. I'm going to pause for just a moment here, and then we'll keep going, because we're not nearly done. Over the years, I've come to realize that these questions don't really end when a video ends. They tend to follow us out, into quiet walks, into sleepless nights, into long drives, into those strange moments when life suddenly feels larger than it did a moment before. So I made a small space called Dreamer for the people who want to stay with these questions a little longer. The audio journeys there are simply an extension of this conversation, slower, more personal, a little less concerned with reaching for answers, and a little more content to just sit inside the wondering. No ads to surface you back out of the quiet, made for exactly these hours. If that's something you'd want, it's all linked below, whenever and if ever you feel like it. And now, back into the mystery, because there's a turn I haven't told you about yet. Everything I've said so far has been about choices, forks in the road, decisions you made, but the deeper you go into possibility, the more you realize that the choices are the small part. Think about how improbable you are, not your choices, your existence. Think about the chain of chance that had to hold, link by link, for you to be here at all. For you to exist, two specific people had to meet. Out of all the people, they each might have met instead. And their parents had to meet. And theirs all the way back, an unbroken chain of improbable meetings stretching across thousands of years, every single link of which could easily have gone differently, and any one of which, if broken, erases you completely. And even granting all those meetings, even granting your exact parents, at the exact moment, the particular combination that became you, rather than one of the countless other people who could have been born in your place, came down to chances so fine that the odds against you specifically, against this exact person with this exact awareness, are beyond astronomical. You are the winner of a lottery with more tickets than there are atoms in your body. So is everyone you've ever met. So is everyone who ever lived. I find this almost impossible to hold in my mind for more than a few seconds at a time. The sheer unlikelihood of any particular person existing. The way each of us is balanced on top of a tower of coincidences so tall and so fragile that it's a kind of miracle it's standing at all. You were not likely. You were not expected. By any reasonable accounting, you should not be here. And yet here you are, listening to this, with the whole improbable machinery of you humming along, having experiences, wondering about existence. Maybe you felt this, usually in some unremarkable moment, which is when it tends to strike. Standing in a kitchen, watching rain, and it floods in. I almost wasn't. None of this was guaranteed. I am a possibility that happened to come true. And every person around you is the same. Every stranger on the street is a near impossibility that nonetheless occurred. A whole world of improbable beings walking around, mostly forgetting how unlikely they are. So we've gone from the lives you didn't live to the staggering unlikelihood of the life you did. From the roads not taken to the near impossibility of there being a traveller at all. And that leads, naturally, to the strangest possibility of all. The one we've been circling this whole time without quite landing on. If your existence is this improbable, if there was so nearly no you at all, then how did the you that is here actually begin? When did the lights come on? Where were you before you were anywhere? I want to go all the way back now, past your choices, past your improbable birth, to the very beginning of you, to the strangest border in your entire existence, the edge where you started. What is your earliest memory? Take a moment and actually go looking for it. Not a story you've been told about yourself. Those don't count. Those are someone else's memory loaned to you. I mean the genuine article, the oldest thing you can actually remember from the inside. The earliest moment where there's a flicker of you in it, looking out. For most people, it's a fragment, a scrap, a patch of sunlight on a floor, a particular toy, the feeling of being carried, a colour, a fear, a face, rarely a whole scene. Almost never a continuous stretch of time. Just an island floating in a sea of nothing, with no clear shore behind it. Mine is almost nothing. A doorway and warm light coming through it, and the sense of someone in the next room I wanted to get to. That's all. No before, no after. A few seconds lifted out of the dark, with no idea how old I was or what day it was or what happened next. I've held onto that scrap my whole life, and I have no idea why that moment, of all the thousands that must have come before it, is the one that stuck. The first frame the camera kept. And here's the strange thing about that earliest memory, whatever it is. Before it, there's nothing. Not darkness. Darkness would be something. Just nothing. A blank where your life simply hadn't started being remembered yet. But you existed before that memory. That's the strange part. You were alive for years before your earliest recollection. You had experiences, thousands of them, days and nights of them, that left no trace at all. Somewhere there was a small child, fully alive, looking out at the world, having a rich stream of experience. And that child's experiences are gone so completely that it's as if they happened to someone else. Which, in a way we talked about earlier, they did. So your life, from the inside, doesn't begin at your birth. It begins later, at this ragged, arbitrary edge, where memory happened to switch on. Behind that edge, you were here, but there's no you that remembers being here. The lights were on in the house, but no one was keeping the records yet. And this raises a question I find genuinely dizzying, one of the deepest in this whole exploration. When did your consciousness actually begin? Not your body, we can date that, but the experience of being you, the awareness, the inner light. When did it first come on? Was it there in the womb, in some dim, formless way, warmth and muffled sound, and the rhythm of a heartbeat that wasn't yours? Was it there at birth, in the shock of cold air and light? Did it come on gradually, like a dimmer switch slowly turning up over the first months and years, getting brighter and more focused, until one day there was a fully formed someone, where before there had been only the beginnings of one? We don't know. We genuinely don't. We cannot remember our own beginning, and we cannot ask a newborn what it's like in there, and we have no instrument that can detect experience directly. The origin of your own consciousness is hidden from you behind a veil you can never lift. You were there for it. You just can't get back. I find something almost unbearably poignant in that. The most important event in your entire existence. The moment you began to be. The moment the universe acquired a new point of view. Your point of view. And you have no memory of it. You missed your own beginning. You woke up part-way through, already underway, already a someone, with no record of how you got here. It's a little like coming to consciousness in a moving train, mid-journey, with no memory of boarding, no idea which station you got on at, only the certainty that you're somehow already aboard and moving. Maybe you've wondered about this. I think children wonder about it more clearly than adults do before they learn to stop asking. Where was I before I was born? It's one of the first genuinely philosophical questions a child asks, and most of us got some gentle, deflecting answer, and we let it go, and we never really came back to it. But it's a real question. Possibly the realest one there is. Where were you? There's a name for this gap, by the way. Scientists call it childhood amnesia. Almost no one has reliable memories from before the age of 3 or so, and only patchy ones for a while after. And it's not that nothing happened. Those were among the most intense, most formative years of your entire life. You were learning to walk, to speak, to love, to fear, absorbing the world at a rate you'll never match again. You were drinking in existence by the gallon, and almost none of it was kept. Where did it go? The experiences were real. The small child having them was real, fully present, fully alive, looking out at the world with wide open attention. And now that whole stretch of lived life is simply gone. Not stored somewhere you can't reach. Gone. As if a person lived an entire intense childhood and then handed you the body and the name and quietly disappeared, leaving you only a few random snapshots and no explanation. I find myself sometimes almost grieving that child, the one whose experiences I can't recover. They were me, and I've lost them more completely than I've lost almost anyone. I can't visit them. I can't ask them what it was like. I can't even properly remember being them. They're the closest person to me who ever lived, and they're more out of reach than a stranger. I've sat with this one far longer than tonight allows. It's one of those questions that opens a door, and then there's a whole house behind it, and you could wander it for years. We can only stand in the doorway tonight, but I wanted you to feel the room is there. And here's the part that turns it from sad to genuinely strange. This is happening all the time, not just at the start. The you of yesterday is already slightly gone. Most of yesterday is already unrecoverable. You remember a few highlights, and the rest has quietly dissolved. You're constantly losing yourself, day by day, and constantly being replaced by a slightly new version who keeps a few souvenirs of the old one and lets the rest go. Childhood amnesia is just the most dramatic case of something that never actually stops. There's a thought here that's haunted thoughtful people for as long as there have been thoughtful people. You can feel it as a kind of vertigo if you let yourself. For the entire history of the universe, billions of years, there was no you. The stars formed and died, the earth cooled, life crawled out of the sea, civilizations rose, and through all of it, for almost the whole vast span of time, there was simply no such thing as your experience. The universe got along perfectly well without you for an eternity. And then for a flicker, a handful of decades, there's this. There's you. A window opens in the long dark, and the universe looks out through your particular eyes and thinks your particular thoughts, and then, well, we'll get to the and then. Not tonight. Maybe not ever, fully. But here is the thing I keep arriving at, and it's not frightening to me. It's closer to awe, the same nothing was behind you before you were born, as will, perhaps, be ahead of you. And you've already done the impossible thing once. You already crossed from not being into being. You're already on the train. Whatever consciousness is, it managed, against staggering odds, to switch on in your case. The light is on. It's on right now. That's not nothing. That might be the only thing that's truly not nothing. I want to connect this back to everything we've walked through, because it's all the same mystery, wearing different clothes, and you may have started to feel that by now. The hard problem asked, why is there any experience at all? Part 6 asks the same question from a different angle. Why is there experience now in your case when for so long there wasn't? The dreams showed us that consciousness can build entire worlds. The mystery of your beginning asks, where did the world builder itself come from? The hidden self showed us that you is a process, a continuity, a pattern that persists while everything changes. And here we find the front edge of that pattern, the place where it began, which you can't remember, which is hidden from you forever, and the quantum and the branching worlds. They whispered that reality, at its root, is stranger than solid. That possibility is somehow woven into the fabric of things. And here you are, the most improbable possibility of all, somehow made actual, somehow lit from within, wondering about the whole arrangement. And do you feel the thread running through all of it? The one I said we'd be following from the start. Why does existence feel larger than a single lifetime? Look at what every part gave us. The dreams, where your single life quietly holds other lives every night, and reunions with the dead. The hidden self, where you turned out to be not one person, but a whole succession of them. A crowd of selves still riding inside you. The unlived lives, the branches where, if the boldest physics is right, versions of you are living all the roads you didn't take. And now this, that your existence reaches back into a darkness before your birth and forward into one after, that you are somehow continuous with the whole long story of a universe far older than you. Every single room opened onto the same view. In each one, your life turned out to be larger than the years between your birth and now, larger than one body, larger than one timeline, larger than the small single life you walk around feeling like you are. Maybe that's why the feeling is so persistent and so universal and so hard to put into words. Maybe existence feels larger than a single lifetime because in every direction we've looked tonight, it genuinely seems to be. It all converges. That's what I've come to feel after years of turning these questions over. They look like separate mysteries: consciousness, dreams, identity, the quantum, possibility, beginnings. And they keep turning out to be the same mystery, viewed from different doorways. The mystery of how there comes to be an inside to the universe at all, a place where it's all happening to someone. So let me bring them all into one room now, not to solve them. I made you a promise about that, and I intend to keep it, but to stand among them together for a while, in the quiet, and feel the full shape of the thing we've been circling all night. Come with me into the last and deepest part. I want to start by simply standing still for a moment with you and noticing where we are. You're somewhere right now, listening to a voice. The light is whatever it is. The hour is late, probably. It usually is for these. And inside you, a whole private world is turning. This voice arriving, thoughts rising in response, a faint awareness of your own body, the soft machinery of being you running the way it has run every moment of your life, without your ever once being asked to operate it. That right there, the bare fact of this moment being experienced, is the mystery. It was never anywhere else. We went looking for it in dreams and in physics and in childhood photographs and in parallel worlds, and all along it was the simplest, nearest thing. The fact that there's an experience happening at all and that it's happening to you. Let me draw the threads together, slowly, the way you'd gather the corners of a blanket. Whoa, we began with the strangest fact of your existence, that you're conscious, that there is something it is like to be you. And we found that this, the most certain fact you have, is the one our science cannot yet explain. The hard problem. The hole in the very centre of the diagram, shaped exactly like you. Then we went to sleep and found that this same consciousness can build entire worlds out of nothing, convincing, complete, lived-in worlds, and that the only world you'll ever know directly, including the waking one, is itself something rendered inside your experience, that the line between real and experienced is far thinner than we let ourselves believe. Then we looked for the self that does all this experiencing, and it dissolved in our hands, not into nothing, but into something stranger than a thing, a process, a river, a pattern that stays itself while every drop is replaced. We found the child in the photograph who is you and isn't, and the future self you're becoming who is just as much a stranger, and the ache of all the selves you imagined and didn't become. Then we went down to the bottom of physical reality and found that it isn't solid at all, that it shimmers with possibility, behaves like a dream, and changes when it's measured in ways that 100 years of genius have not fully untangled. And we were honest. That consciousness controls it is almost certainly a misreading. That consciousness might play some deeper role is a serious but unproven minority hope. And that the real mystery, why the many possibilities become the single world you experience, remains genuinely open. Then we let possibility bloom outward into the lives we didn't live, and met the serious, unproven idea that maybe they're all lived somewhere in branches we can never reach, and found that, true or not, it makes this one life, the one with you actually inside it, the rarest thing there is. And finally we went all the way back to the hidden border of your own beginning, the moment the light came on, which you were present for and cannot remember, and we stood at the edge of the long dark from which you somehow emerged. And here's what I see, now that they're all in one room together. They rhyme. I didn't plan it that way, by the way. I want to be honest about that. When I started thinking about these things years ago, they felt like separate hobbies, a curiosity about dreams over here, a fascination with physics over there, a private ache about old photographs that I didn't connect to either. It took me a long time and a lot of late nights like this one to notice they were all the same question in different costumes. I remember the evening it finally clicked. I was doing nothing important, just standing at a window, and the whole thing fell into place at once, and I felt that particular vertigo you get when a pattern you've been staring at for years suddenly resolves. I almost wanted to call someone, but it's not the kind of thing you can say at that hour to most people without sounding strange. So I suppose, in a way, I've been waiting a long time to say it to someone who'd understand, and tonight that someone is you. Every one of these mysteries is, underneath, the same astonishment. The astonishment that there is an inside to things, that the universe isn't only happening, it's being witnessed, that somewhere in this vast arrangement of matter and energy and time, the lights came on, and a point of view opened up, and the cosmos acquired the strange new property of being experienced from within. That's you. That's what you are. Not a thing in the universe so much as a place where the universe became aware of itself. A window, an inside, a spot where it all stops being dark and starts being seen. I don't say that to make you feel grand. The opposite, almost. I say it because it's humbling in the deepest way. We spend our lives feeling like small things in a large world, and we are. But the largeness only exists, only shows up, only is anything at all because there are little inside places like you for it to appear within. Without consciousness, the entire magnificent universe would be a show playing to an empty theatre. Stars no one sees, beauty no one beholds, vastness with no one to be small before it. You're not separate from the mystery, looking at it from outside. You're the part of it that woke up. You're where it gets to be witnessed. Now, I promised you I wouldn't solve this, and I won't. I want to keep that promise carefully, because I think the temptation to wrap it up with a neat answer is exactly the thing that would cheapen everything we've done. I'm not going to tell you consciousness is quantum. The honest science says unproven, and probably not in the simple way people hope. I'm not going to tell you your mind creates reality. The honest science says almost certainly not in the way the slogans claim. I'm not going to tell you there are definitely parallel worlds, or that the self is an illusion, or that there's nothing after the light goes out, or that there's something. I don't know. Nobody knows. Anyone who tells you they know about any of this with certainty, be gentle with them, but don't quite believe them. What I'll tell you instead is the only thing I'm actually sure of. After all these years and all these late nights, the mystery is real. It's not a gap in our knowledge that we're about to close. It's not a puzzle with the answer in the back of the book. It is, as far as anyone can honestly tell, a genuine and possibly permanent feature of being a conscious creature in this universe. We are the kind of beings who can ask why we're here and what we are, and we may simply be the kind of beings who cannot fully answer. And I've stopped finding that frustrating. I've started finding it almost holy. Because think about the alternative. Imagine if it were all solved. Imagine if you could be handed a single tidy paragraph that fully explained what consciousness is, where it comes from, what you are, what happens at the end. Imagine the mystery drained completely out of it. I don't think I'd want that. I think the not knowing is part of the gift. The wonder isn't a problem to be eliminated. The wonder might be the whole point. The questions might be more valuable than the answers could ever be, because the questions are alive, and they keep you looking, and the looking is itself a form of being awake. And here's the last thread, the one I most want to leave in your hands. You are not the only one who wonders about this. I know it can feel that way. These aren't the questions that come up over coffee. You don't usually mention at dinner that you sometimes look at old photos and feel the strangeness of being a continuous self, or that you lie awake aware of your own awareness, or that you wonder where you were before you were born. We carry these quietly. Most people assume they're the only one, but you're not. You never were. For as long as there have been human beings, there have been people lying awake exactly like this, turning these exact questions over in the dark, feeling exactly this mixture of smallness and wonder and ache and awe, across every century, in every language, under the same stars. A vast, silent company of wanderers, most of whom never knew about each other. And tonight, for a few hours, you've been among them. You've been understood. The things you've quietly carried for years, someone said them out loud, and you recognized them. And that recognition means you are never as alone in this as it felt. That, more than anything, is why I make these. Not to answer the questions, to keep company inside them, to say the quiet things out loud so that the people who've been carrying them alone can hear them spoken and feel that small, profound relief of, oh, someone else thinks about this too. And that's ultimately why Sleepy Physicist exists. We're near the end now, and I want the last little while to feel less like exploring and more like coming home, like the part of the evening where the talking slows down and you don't have to fill the quiet anymore, and you just sit with someone in the comfortable dark. So let me stop reaching for new mysteries and just sit for a moment with the ones we've found. I told you at the very beginning that I wouldn't be able to answer the central question, and I haven't. I don't know whether consciousness is connected to the deep structure of reality. I don't know whether your awareness reaches into the quantum world or floats entirely above it. I don't know whether the lives you didn't live are being lived somewhere else, or whether they're only the beautiful fictions of a mind built to imagine more than it can hold. I don't know where you were before you were born, or where the light goes when it goes. I know less than I'd like. We all do. That's the human condition. When you strip it down, a brief, bright awareness, set down in the middle of a mystery, with no memory of arriving and no clear view of the way out, asking questions far larger than it can answer, and somehow, this is the part that gets me, loving the asking anyway. And maybe that's enough. Maybe that's even the point. There's an old idea, much older than physics, that the questions we can't answer are not failures, but invitations. That a mystery isn't a locked door we've failed to open. It's a room large enough to keep walking into for a whole lifetime, finding new corners, never reaching the far wall. The not knowing isn't poverty. It's a kind of spaciousness. It's the reason there's always somewhere further to go. I've made my peace with not knowing. More than peace, I've come to love it. Because a fully explained universe would be a finished thing, and I don't want to live in a finished thing. I want to live in this, an unfinished, open, astonishing place, where even the most ordinary evening contains more mystery than I could exhaust in 100 lifetimes, and where the simple fact that I'm here to notice it remains the strangest and most precious thing of all. Here is what I hope you take with you when you turn this off and go back into your life. I hope you carry the strangeness gently. I hope that the next time you catch sight of an old photograph of yourself, you feel the wonder in it instead of only the passing of time. I hope that the next time you wake from a vivid dream, you spend a second marvelling at the world your own mind just built. I hope that the next time you lie awake, aware of being aware, you don't feel alone in it, because you'll know now that countless others are lying awake in exactly the same wonder across the whole world tonight. And I hope, most of all, that you feel a little less alone in the carrying of these questions, because you were never the only one. You were just one of the quiet ones who never heard it said out loud. Tonight, it got said out loud, and you recognized it, and that recognition is its own small kind of homecoming. Some of these questions can never fully fit inside a single video. Dreams, identity, the strange sense that your awareness is somehow older than your memory. That feeling of looking at a childhood photograph and aching towards someone who no longer exists and yet somehow still does, who is in fact you sitting here now. I said something near the beginning that I keep coming back to, that some questions aren't meant to be answered once. They're meant to be lived with. And the longer I sit with these, the more I find that's exactly what they are. Not problems to solve and put down, but companions to keep. That's really what Dreamer is. A small space for staying with these questions a little longer. The audio journeys there are just a continuation of what we did tonight. Slower, more personal, ad-free, made for late hours exactly like this one. If you'd like to keep wandering through these questions with me, you'll find it all linked below, the free guide and Dreamer, whenever you feel like it. And if not, that's completely okay too. Truly. You don't owe me anything for tonight. I'm just glad you spent part of your evening here, in the quiet, wandering alongside me. So I'll leave you where I always seem to end up, after all the questions have been asked and none of them answered. We started by wondering whether consciousness might be connected to reality in some strange hidden way, whether the mind and the quantum and the dream and the self might all be threads of one deep thing. And we found that we can't say. Not yet, maybe not ever, but here, at the very end, I find a different thought has quietly taken the place of the one I started with, and I want to give it to you, and then let you go. Remember the question I planted at the very beginning, on the floor, with that old photograph? Why does existence feel larger than a single lifetime? I told you I didn't have the answer, and I still don't. Not really. But I think I understand the feeling a little better now than when we started, because everywhere we looked tonight, the same thing kept happening. Your one life kept turning out to contain more than one life, the dreamer and the dreamed, the child and the person they became, and the stranger you're still becoming. The lives you didn't live, walking beside the one you did, the long dark before you and the long dark after, and this impossible lit window in between. Maybe existence feels larger than a single lifetime, because you are never only a single lifetime. You're a place where the whole universe, all of it, the part that was here long before you and the part that will outlast you, briefly folded inward and became able to feel itself. You're not a small thing that the cosmos happens to contain. You're the cosmos, for a little while, gathered into a point where it can finally wonder what it all means. So perhaps the greatest mystery is not whether consciousness is connected to reality. Perhaps the greatest mystery is that reality became conscious enough to wonder about itself at all. That the universe, after all its long and silent ages, produced something like you, a small, warm, temporary place where it could finally turn around and look at itself and be amazed and ask why. You are the cosmos wondering about the cosmos, the mystery, contemplating the mystery, and there is nothing more remarkable in all of existence than that quiet, ordinary, impossible fact. Thank you for wondering with me tonight, and remember, the questions don't close just because the video does. They'll still be here in the morning, the way they were here long before tonight, waiting quietly to be picked up again whenever you want them. There's no hurry, they keep, and there's a place to keep sitting with them, for as long as you like, whenever you're ready, and never before. But for now, there's nothing left to do, and nowhere you need to be. Sleep well. And if you can't sleep, if you find yourself lying awake, aware of being aware, turning these questions over in the dark, then know that somewhere, someone else is doing exactly the same. You are never the only one. Good night.